Broadcasting from Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro on WDET. I'm Kerry Jr. II.
And I'm Robin Vincent. Today on the show, Michigan kids are struggling to read.
What's standing in the way of better reading outcomes for students here?
We'll look at how Mississippi turned the page and what it might teach us.
Plus, Black entertainers and travelers used to flock to Idlewild during segregation.
Now, local leaders are redeveloping decayed venues, restoring roots, and reviving its legacy.
And Michigan's deer herd is booming, and in some suburbs, it's causing real problems. Now, a growing number of cities are turning to sharpshooters.
But first, this summer is tracking to be the hottest on record. But it could be among the coolest summers we have for the rest of our lives. That's the takeaway of a recent article from the Union of Concerned Scientists. It's a nonprofit made up of climate scientists founded at MIT in 1969. Scientists have warned of global warming for decades now and the need for more urgent action. That's because avoiding the worst effects of man-made climate change will require cooperation on a global scale. But a large paradigm shift has to involve city governments and local power players too. Now, Detroit's primary election for mayor and city council is this coming Tuesday, August 5th. And whoever takes the reins as Detroit's next mayor will be in a unique position to get Detroit ready for the climate that's already changed significantly. Or they can keep us exposed and unprepared in the face of extreme heat and severe weather. But the next city's mayor still needs to be elected, and there are 9 people on the ballot, plus write-in candidates. Who Detroit's next mayor is, well, it's up to the people of Detroit. Ellen Weil is the Detroit program manager for the Michigan Environmental Council. The council is a coalition of organizations that have created a thorough 48-page environmental voter guide. Ellen is with me now in the studio. Ellen, welcome to the Metro.
Hi, Robin. Thanks so much for having me.
So the voter guide put together by the Michigan Environmental Council is extensive, as is the list of partner organizations. We're going to talk about the issues and the candidates in a moment. But first, why was it necessary to develop a voter guide for environmental issues in the first place?
Yeah, sure. So this voter guide is actually something that this coalition, the Detroit Environmental Agenda, has been doing since 2013. We've put out a voter guide for municipal elections every 4 years. This is the second one I've been involved in under my tenure with MEC. And a big impetus for putting together these voter guides is to lift up issues of environmental justice and climate in our municipal elections. As you mentioned, this might be the coolest summer of the rest of our lives, right?
Which sounds terrible.
The air's been thick out there. And so it's one of those issues that whoever we elect is going to have to deal with it. And we want to make sure that these candidates are prepared and thinking about it ahead of time. And we want to know where their head's at about things like air quality, about things like transportation, about things like climate resilience.
Air quality, transportation, climate resilience. I'm also thinking about flooding. These are some of the things that you're talking about in the guide. What are the top issues, in addition to those you just mentioned, according to the experts and partner organizations in the coalition?
So, yeah, we have over 20 organizations in the coalition. So we really run the gamut of climate and environmental justice issues as they manifest in the city of Detroit. So we have organizations that do waste diversion, like recycling and composting. We have organizations that advocate and organize around water access and water affordability. We have groups in our coalition, like Eastside Community Network, who are leading the charge to build resilience hubs around the city, especially on the east side right now. And then some shared values across the entire coalition. I would say making sure that sort of sustainability and climate is prioritized writ large down at KMAC, right? So making sure that we have an Office of Sustainability that's well-funded, well-staffed, and can take on some of these necessary priorities in these projects. What to do with vacant land. You mentioned flooding.
Yeah, quite a few things here. One thing I want to go back to, because it might sound like a new term to some folks, and that is climate resilience or climate resiliency. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. So the idea basically is that we know that these huge weather events are already here, right? I think all of us remember the big floods in 2021, which happened while we were producing our last voter guide. And it's interesting, if you look back, those questions about flooding didn't make it into that guide. Now, flooding is probably the top issue.
Top of mind,
that's talked about this time around. So the idea that we know that these events are going to happen, and so how can we prepare to protect city residents from when we have those once in 100-year floods?
What has it been like to try and connect these personal experiences for folks who are experiencing flooding with the fact that this has to do with climate change? Like, making that connection seems really important when you're trying to mobilize people to understand how climate change is having these really local effects on the ground.
That's a really good question. And it's interesting. I've worked in environmental advocacy now for over 5 years. And I think when I came to this work, it necessitated a lot more drawing parallels and telling stories. I would say now at this point in 2025, most people who are in politics or running for office already hold that understanding. And massive credit to the folks who are running for mayor and council in the city. I think that their responses in this voter guide demonstrate that understanding.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the mayoral race specifically. We've spoken to all of the candidates on the Metro now, and they've talked a lot about business, economic growth, housing, and services for residents. We haven't heard as much on environmental policy for the city. I'm wondering, from your lens, have any candidates really emerged with a strong platform that you feel addresses the top issues that we've been discussing?
So I've also noticed that. I think it's, Mayor Duggan said whoever wins the next election is going to have to deal with crime, neighborhoods, and jobs. And that's what I hear all of the candidates talking about all the time. And also part of the reason why we wanted to do this voter guide and publicize it widely, because it's an important issue for the candidates to be talking about too. I would say Santil Jenkins, with her background as the executive director of THAW, as her responses in the voter guide really spoke to, as an environmental advocate, what I see as some of the most important issues to be addressed in the city, which is, flooding mitigation, green stormwater infrastructure, tree planting to address heat islands, and housing weatherization. Fred Durhal also talks about public transit a lot. All of the mayoral candidates who filled out our voter guide, at least, and who I've speak around town, are supportive of expanding service through DDOT, although not many have connected it to things like climate change and air quality and stuff like that.
So then what can the city's next mayor really do to make Detroit a climate resilient city, or even to make Detroit a greener city? I mean, one thing you're touching on right now is transportation, but it's important, as you've noted, to really draw the line, to connect some of the reasons that we need improved transportation and greener transportation. And it's not just in order to improve the lives of people who don't have access to cars, let's say, but it's also about the environment and how things can improve in that way.
One thing that I think will be huge, and perhaps the biggest thing, is I think that we need to imbue a sustainability and environmental justice lens across departments. We need to recognize the connections between, like you said, transportation, expanding DDOT service helps people get around, and it also helps reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, right? Something we talk about in the guide is right now, BC is the department that deals with air quality. So it's like strictly through a permitting process. And the health department doesn't have sort of like an environmental health responsibility within its repertoire, unlike cities like Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, where environmental health is like a sub-department within their health department. So we would love to see these issues being seeing more collaboration, I guess, across departments to address some of these issues. And folks I've talked to who work in the city say, right now we're really siloed for the most part. And I think whoever wins the selection in November has an opportunity to create stronger cross-functional collaboration across departments to ensure that we are helping people live healthier lives, protecting them from climate change, and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, so what you're saying is that in the city of Detroit, there are a lot of efforts underway, but they're very fragmented. And in order to see some amount of meaningful change, they have to come together more. These efforts have to be more they need to connect in ways that they haven't yet. And so this makes me think about the fact that Mayor Duggan has been celebrated as this coalition builder, but it sounds like in this arena, when it comes to environmental work, environmental advocacy, environmental justice, and climate resiliency, that he wasn't as much of that kind of coalition builder, and that's what the city is going to need now.
Yeah, I think, Duggan had a couple of things that he could kind of put his rubber stamp on, like the Solar Neighborhoods Initiative. But in terms of sort of like bringing environmental justice as a value, as a motivator for policy work, there's a lot of opportunity for this next mayor to do more work in that area.
This is the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. My guest is Ellen Weil, Detroit Program Manager for the Michigan Environmental Council. It recently published an environmental voter guide for Detroit's mayoral and city council elections. The primary election is this coming Tuesday. The guide lays out issues and where candidates stand on those issues. Now let's talk about the city council, Ellen, if we could. What influence does City Council have on environmental quality of life in Detroit?
So council, as our legislative body, has a lot of power to bring up issues and pass them and create new ordinances that protect us from climate change and make sure that we're protecting public health in the city. In the last couple of years, the council passed a fugitive dust ordinance, right, which requires local polluters to decrease, or I guess it improves enforcement around fugitive dust. So there's a lot more opportunities for council to do stuff like that. And there's a few things that have already been proposed. So I think, another big role that the council can play in the coming administration is, what they're putting in the budget, right? That's going to be one of the biggest ways that council.
Yeah, sending the message of we do want to spend money on environmental initiatives. Are there any candidates for city council that stand out as being particularly focused on environmental policy?
Yeah, Councilwoman Gabriela Santiago Romero from District 6 is a huge environmental justice champion, and her responses in the voter guide definitely speak to that. I would say of all of the sitting council members, she's been one of the most vocal and strongest champions around environmental issues. I would also highlight Denzel McCampbell, who's running for District 7. He worked for Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and has had a couple other roles in the city, and is a huge champion for environmental justice.
Okay. And when we think about these candidates and the issues, it's difficult to not think about some of the people who are missing from these conversations, because the candidates, or if they become leaders or stay in their roles, won't be able to unilaterally make a policy decision and just have it happen overnight. It's going to require action and cooperation across government, business, nonprofits, and with residents. This voter guide has a lot of partner organizations listed. How robust is the Coalition for Environmental Sustainability and Climate Action in Detroit right now? In other words, I'm wondering what sectors are missing.
I would say that, like you said, we have a really well-networked group of advocates in the city of Detroit who work on environmental justice and sustainability. I think it's tough for us to access partners in the business community. And some of the reason for that is because I think there are certain things that we agree on, but our methods of getting there are not necessarily aligned. Like the Detroit Regional Chamber lists transportation as public transportation as one of their priorities. And we've reached out to them and tried to, talk about, okay, cool. How do we get this done? Right? Like, how do we see more buses? At one point they said we'll have a bus bus every 15 minutes on every spoke. I think that's an amazing vision. We should work towards that. The regional chamber has different ideas about how to fund transportation and what transportation even looks like, right, in terms of mobility. And that could be like, bringing Waymo to Detroit, which, that would not be my priority, but it's something that people think about in the mobility space.
So, I mean, it sounds like there's everyone wants some of the same things, but there's a disconnect here about what it means to bring some of these things to residents and what's at stake. And from your perch, it is the environmental policy aspect of it. But Detroiters have a lot of reasons to vote in the primary and general election. And the next mayor of Detroit and city council, they're going to have a lot of problems to solve. Economic growth, housing, providing city services, education, public health. We know a lot of residents are living in poverty and just missing the basics. Is environmental policy as important as other key issue areas that candidates are focusing on?
That's such a good question, and it's one that we grapple with all the time amongst ourselves and with people down at City Hall. I would say that environmental justice is an issue that we can't turn away from, and it's fundamentally imbued with these economic and social justice issues that you're talking about. Things like transportation, right? Like, people need to be able to get around the city. We have the highest car insurance rates in the country. And so people ride dirty all the time, and that puts them at risk of getting pulled over and arrested. If we could just rely on the bus system and public transportation, we wouldn't have to worry about that. I live in Island View, and my office is in Milwaukee Junction. It's a 13-minute drive, but if I took the bus, it would be an hour.
Right.
And that's if both buses come on time. Other things like, housing and weatherization is so huge for the city. And when we talk about living in poverty, like, we can't separate that from healthy housing, right? Like, people need housing, and they need housing that is healthy and safe to live in. And so much of that is weatherization, making sure that people have a roof that doesn't have holes in it, making sure that they have windows that are insulating, making sure that they don't have lead paint in their houses, which is a huge risk to children and pregnant women in the city of Detroit.
So there are inextricable links between so much of the problems that we're facing in Detroit and environmental policy and climate justice and climate resiliency. Well, thank you for trying to illuminate some of those links for us. Ellen Weil is the Detroit program manager for the Michigan Environmental Council. The council is a coalition of organizations that have created a thorough 48-page environmental voter guide for Detroit's mayoral and city council elections. The city's primary election is Tuesday. Ellen, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thanks so much for having me, Robin.
We've spoken to all of the mayoral candidates on the Metro. You can find those conversations and more at wdet.org/voter guide 2025. WDET's listener survey is now open, and your feedback helps shape the future of Detroit Public Radio. It's quick, anonymous, and lets us know what you love, what you'd like more of, and where we can improve. Complete the survey and you'll be entered for a chance to win a custom WDET prize pack. Visit wdet.org/survey. Coming up next on the Metro, the deer population in Southeast Michigan, it just continues to grow, and more cities are turning to deer calls to address the issue. Coming up, a conversation with a Farmington Hills official on what they're doing to reduce the number of deer there. We'll be right back on the Metro. Stay with us.